Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at the 12 technologies that are going to totally reshape our world by 2025.
That's right, and we're going to figure out what these technologies mean for you.
Yeah, like how they're going to change how you work, how you live, pretty much everything.
Absolutely.
So to get started, let's talk about something you've probably already heard of. Generative AI. You know, like ChatGPT, all those AI image generators.
Right.
Well, get ready, because now we're moving into what's called multimodal AI.
Yeah, so think about it like this. You're launching like a new product, right?
Okay.
So instead of hiring like a whole team of writers, designers, composers,
Right.
you could just give your vision to an AI.
Oh.
And bam! It just spits out this whole marketing campaign, like from the website copy to even jingles.
Wow.
All specifically made for like your target audience.
That's some next level efficiency right there.
It is.
I mean, it sounds amazing for businesses.
Yeah.
But I can't help but think about all the creative people, whose jobs might be on the line.
Yeah, that's a valid concern for sure. And it's a pattern we're going to see throughout a lot of these technologies we're going to talk about today. Like, the main takeaway is that the job market is changing really fast, and being able to adapt and always learning new things, that's going to be more important than ever.
For sure. Okay, so let's switch gears to something that sounds like straight out of Star Trek.
Okay.
Quantum computing.
All right.
I know it's supposed to be, like, super powerful.
Yeah.
But I'm still not quite sure what it actually does.
So imagine you're trying to find a specific grain of sand
Okay.
on a beach, right? A traditional computer would have to go through each grain one by one.
Right.
But a quantum computer could analyze that entire beach all at the same time.
Oh, wow.
That's the kind of power we're talking about.
Okay, yeah, that's a really helpful analogy.
Good.
So what does that kind of power actually look like in the real world?
Okay, well, let's take cybersecurity, for example.
Right.
Quantum computing could crack the encryption that protects your online banking, in just seconds.
Right.
But at the same time, it can also be used to make new encryption methods that are unbreakable.
Oh, wow.
So it's like this technological arms race,
Yeah,
with really high stakes for everyone.
it's like a double-edged sword.
Exactly.
Okay, so this next one is fascinating and a little bit scary at the same time.
Okay.
Brain-computer interfaces.
All right.
So is this like actually mind reading?
Not quite mind reading, but it is getting close.
Okay.
So BCIs, they make this direct link between your brain and a computer.
Okay.
So for someone who can't move their body, that could mean they could control a prosthetic limb just by thinking about it.
Wow.
Imagine the possibilities for giving people back their mobility and independence.
That's incredible. But I also keep thinking about those sci-fi movies where technology like takes over people's minds.
Right.
Is that like a real concern with BCIs?
Well, it's important to remember that BCIs are still in like the early stages.
Okay.
But just like with any really powerful technology, we have to consider the risks, right? So data privacy, security, user autonomy, like all of these things are really important factors that have to be looked at as this technology gets better.
Definitely. All right, let's move on to something a little bit more down to earth.
All right.
Green hydrogen.
All right.
I know it's supposed to be a clean energy source, but how does it actually work?
So you can think of green hydrogen as a way to store energy
Right.
from sources like wind and solar.
Okay.
So you use that energy to split water molecules, and then you have hydrogen left over, and that can be used as a fuel.
So instead of relying on fossil fuels, we could power our homes and our cars with hydrogen that comes from clean energy.
Exactly. And the best part is when you burn hydrogen, the only thing that comes out is water vapor.
Wow.
No bad emissions, nothing, just clean energy.
That sounds amazing for the planet.
It is.
But is it really possible to think we can move to a hydrogen-based economy anytime soon?
Well, there are some challenges.
Like what?
Like, we need to figure out how to make enough of it. And we need to build ways to get it to everyone.
Right.
But the potential is definitely there.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
definitely something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. Okay, now let's talk about something that's been all over the news lately.
Right.
CRISPR gene editing.
Yeah,
I mean, it has the potential to revolutionize medicine,
for sure.
but I'm not sure I understand exactly what it is.
So CRISPR is kind of like a molecular scalpel.
Right.
It lets scientists make super precise changes to DNA.
Wow.
And this means that we could cure genetic diseases,
Really?
like cystic fibrosis or sickle cell anemia.
It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It does.
But I know there are a lot of ethical concerns about gene editing.
Right. You're right. The ability to change our genes brings up a ton of really complicated questions.
Like what?
Like, how do we make sure that this technology is used responsibly and ethically?
Right.
How do we make sure there aren't any unintended consequences? These are conversations we need to be having as a society.
Absolutely. It's like opening Pandora's box, right?
Yeah.
There's so much potential for good, but also maybe some unintended bad stuff too. So it's definitely a technology that we need to think about really carefully.
Yeah, for sure. And those conversations are happening right now all over the world in labs and universities and governments.
Right.
It's a really fast-moving field with a lot going on.
Okay, so let's move on to another area that sounds pretty sci-fi.
Okay.
Synthetic biology. So are we talking about creating like totally new life forms?
So think of it more like redesigning the organisms that already exist
Okay.
to do very specific things.
Like what?
Like imagine bacteria that could break down all the plastic pollution,
Oh, wow.
or yeast that could produce biofuels.
So we're using like the building blocks of life to solve some of our biggest problems.
Exactly. And synthetic biology could totally change so many things, from medicine and agriculture to manufacturing and cleaning up the environment.
Wow. Okay, now this next one is something we're already seeing in action, I think.
Okay.
Advanced robotics and automation. I know that robots are being used in factories and warehouses and stuff.
Right.
But how far is this automation trend going to go?
So we're moving towards a future where robots are going to be smarter and more adaptable.
Wow.
And they'll be able to do a wider range of tasks.
Like what?
Think self-driving cars,
Right.
delivery drones,
Mm-hmm.
even robots that could help with surgeries or taking care of the elderly.
So are robots going to be doing a lot of the jobs that humans do now?
Yeah.
Does that mean we're all going to be out of a job?
Well, it's a valid concern,
Yeah.
and one that we have to be proactive about addressing.
So what can we do?
We need to focus on education and training programs that give people the skills they need to succeed in a world where automation is everywhere.
Right.
We need to be thinking about the jobs of the future, not the jobs of the past.
I see. So it's about adapting and evolving along with the technology.
Exactly.
It's not robots against humans. It's finding ways for them to work together.
Right. It's about embracing the possibilities while also keeping in mind the potential challenges.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk about a technology that has the potential to save so many lives.
Okay.
3D printed organs and bioprinting.
All right.
So can we really print a working human organ?
We're not quite there yet,
Okay,
but we're making a lot of progress.
like what?
Well, scientists can already print skin grafts
Wow.
and simple tissues, and there's research going on right now to print more complicated organs like kidneys and livers.
Wow.
Imagine a world where we don't have to worry about organ shortages anymore.
Right.
And people don't have to wait years for a transplant that could save their life.
That would be incredible.
Yeah.
But what about the ethics of all this?
Yeah.
Like, who gets access to these printed organs? How do we make sure it's fair for everyone?
Yeah, those are really important questions.
Yeah.
And they highlight the need for careful planning and thoughtful conversations as this technology keeps developing.
For sure.
We have to make sure that bioprinting helps everyone, not just a select few.
Absolutely. Okay, let's shift our focus from Earth to space
Okay.
and talk about space-based solar power.
All right.
Is it really possible to collect energy from the sun in space and beam it down to Earth?
It sounds like science fiction,
It does.
but it's an idea that people are really looking into. Think
Okay.
about it up in space. The sun's always shining.
Right?
There's no atmosphere to block the sunlight,
Uh-huh.
and you could collect energy 24/7.
So we're talking about a clean, abundant source of energy that could basically be limitless.
Potentially? Yes.
Sign me up. But what about the logistics of actually building and maintaining something like that in space?
Well, there are definitely some technological and financial hurdles.
Yeah.
But the possible benefits are huge.
For sure.
It's a long-term vision,
Yeah.
but it could completely change how we get our energy.
Wow. Okay, now this next one is really connected to the growth of renewable energy.
Okay.
Next generation batteries and energy storage.
All right.
I know that we need better batteries for electric cars and solar power.
Yeah.
But what kind of breakthroughs are we talking about here?
Imagine electric cars that can fully charge in minutes and
Huh.
drive hundreds of miles on one charge. Or
Right.
homes that are powered by solar panels
Uh-huh.
and they have enough stored energy to last through the night.
Wow.
That's the potential of these next generation batteries.
Like what?
Like solid state batteries and graphene supercapacitors.
Oh, we're talking about batteries that last longer, charge faster,
Right.
and are way more efficient.
Yes.
And that could make renewable energy sources a lot more practical for everybody.
Exactly. Next-gen batteries are a really important part of moving to a cleaner, more sustainable energy future.
Awesome. All right, so let's wrap up this first part of our deep dive with a technology that's already connecting people all over the world.
Okay.
Low Earth orbit satellite networks.
LEO.
Yeah, I know that Starlink is an example of this.
Right.
But what's so special about LEO satellites?
So think about all the people in remote areas
Okay.
who don't have access to reliable internet. LEO satellite networks can beam high-speed internet down to Earth,
Wow.
and that means connecting even the most isolated communities.
So we're talking about closing the digital divide.
Yes.
And giving billions of people worldwide access to things like education, healthcare, and economic opportunities.
Exactly. LEO satellite networks could really help to give everyone access to information and empower communities everywhere.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
From AI that can create whole marketing campaigns to the idea of beaming solar energy down from space,
Yeah,
these technologies are mind-blowing.
they are, and we're just getting started.
Oh, wow.
In part 2, we're going to dig deeper into how these technologies might impact your life.
Okay.
We'll explore the challenges and the opportunities, and we'll talk about how you can get ready for the future that they're creating.
So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll continue exploring these 12 emerging technologies and help you make sense of the future that's happening right now.
Absolutely. Welcome back to our deep dive into these 12 emerging technologies that are going to totally transform our world by 2025.
I am so ready for more.
In part 1, we unpacked what these technologies are,
Yeah.
but now let's get into how they're going to impact your life.
Awesome. In part 1, we talked about the possibility of some jobs disappearing because of things like multimodal AI.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that a little more.
Okay, so imagine a world where everyone gets a totally personalized education, with AI tutors that create lessons just for you and your learning style.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Super efficient, but it also makes you think, what happens to teachers then?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Will certain jobs just not exist anymore?
Right.
But then what about the new jobs that'll be created that we can't even think of yet?
That's the big question. We might see a huge need for people who can connect humans and AI,
Yeah.
folks who can train AI, manage it, and fix it when it breaks.
Right.
It's not just about coding.
Right.
It's about understanding how both humans and AI work.
So it sounds like being able to adapt and learn new skills is going to be really important.
Absolutely. Constantly learning new things isn't just something people say anymore. It's going to be essential to stay ahead of the game.
Okay, so let's move on to quantum computing.
All right.
In part 1, we talked about how it could be used to break encryption,
Right.
but also to create unbreakable encryption.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
So what does that mean in the real world?
It means that everything we use to keep our information safe online, like our bank accounts,
Right.
and even national secrets could be vulnerable.
Oh, wow.
But then again, we could also have this new era of cybersecurity where everything online is basically unhackable.
So it's kind of a race then.
It is like a high-stakes game of cat and mouse.
What does that mean for regular people who don't know a lot about cybersecurity?
It means that we have to stay informed about all of these changes
Okay.
and demand better security from the companies and organizations that have our data.
Right.
We have to be proactive, about protecting ourselves online.
Okay, let's go back to brain-computer interfaces.
Right.
It's amazing to think that BCIs could help people who can't move.
It is.
But what about the possibility of someone using BCIs for bad things?
Okay.
Like, could someone hack into a BCI and control someone else's thoughts?
Well, we've seen that in sci-fi movies.
Right.
And it's definitely something we have to think about.
Yeah.
As BCIs get more advanced security, and ethics will be super important
Right.
to prevent hacking and make sure that people's privacy and thoughts are protected.
It's almost like we need new laws for BCIs,
Right.
like we have for medicine and drugs.
Yeah, exactly. We need to be planning ahead and setting clear rules for how these powerful technologies are used.
Okay, let's move to green hydrogen.
Okay.
We talked about using it for cars and homes,
Uh-huh.
but what about other things?
Well, green hydrogen can also be used to clean up industries that are hard to make electric,
Like what?
like making steel
Okay.
or shipping things across the ocean. Imagine cargo ships using clean hydrogen instead of all those fossil fuels.
So it's not just about individuals being eco-friendly.
Right.
It's about changing whole industries.
Exactly. It's about making big changes for a more sustainable future.
Now, what about CRISPR gene editing? We talked about curing diseases,
Uh-huh.
but could CRISPR also be used to make humans smarter or more athletic?
Well, that's a big debate right now.
Yeah.
And it brings up lots of ethical questions.
Like what?
Like, where's the line between treating a disease and enhancing a human?
Okay.
And what happens if only rich people can afford these genetic enhancements?
It's like we could rewrite what it means to be human
Right.
And we need to be really careful.
We do. The power of CRISPR means we need to think about all the possible consequences for science, ethics, and society.
Okay, let's move on to synthetic biology.
All right.
We talked about engineering organisms to do specific jobs.
Right.
But what if something goes wrong?
Okay.
Like, what if a lab-created organism gets out into the environment?
Well, that's a valid concern, and that's why scientists have to be really careful.
Right.
We have to understand how ecosystems work and have really strong safety measures in place.
So we need to be smart about using synthetic biology.
Yes, we need to be aware of the risks and take steps to prevent problems before we release anything new into the world.
Now let's think about advanced robotics and automation again.
Okay.
We talked about robots taking over some human jobs.
Right.
But what about the social side of things?
Yeah, okay.
Will people become more isolated if they're interacting with machines all the time?
Well, that's something to think about for sure.
Yeah.
We need to remember that technology is a tool,
Right.
and we have to be intentional about making time for real human connections.
So it's not about rejecting technology.
Yeah.
It's about making sure it helps us live better lives.
Exactly. We have to find a balance and use technology to connect with each other and build a better future.
Let's talk about 3D printed organs.
Okay.
We talked about how they could solve the problem of organ shortages.
Right.
But will everyone be able to afford them?
Yeah, cost is a really important thing to think about as bioprinting gets better.
Right.
We need to make sure that everyone who needs a printed organ can get one,
Yeah.
no matter how much money they have.
So we might need to rethink how healthcare works.
These new technologies should benefit everyone, not just the wealthy.
Let's go back to space and talk about space-based solar power.
Right.
We talked about clean energy,
Uh-huh.
but what about the impact on the environment of building and maintaining a huge solar power system in space?
Well, that's something we have to consider, too.
Right.
We have to weigh the benefits of clean energy against the impact of launching things into space and dealing with space junk.
So it's not just about the energy itself.
Right.
It's about making sure we're not harming the environment in other ways.
Exactly. Sustainability matters everywhere, both here on Earth and in space.
Okay, now let's think about next generation batteries again.
Okay.
We talked about electric cars charging faster and homes powered by solar energy.
Yeah.
But what about the environmental impact of making and getting rid of batteries?
Yeah, that's a good point. As we move to a world with more electric things, we need to think about the impact of making batteries,
Right.
mining the materials for them, and recycling them responsibly.
So it's more than just switching to electric cars.
It is. It's about making the whole battery process sustainable and ethical.
Okay, let's wrap up this part of our deep dive with LEO satellite networks.
All right.
We talked about bringing internet access to people in remote areas.
Right.
But could these networks also be used for surveillance
Okay.
or even military operations?
Well, that's a possibility, and that's why it's important to have international rules and agreements
Right.
about how to use space responsibly and ethically.
So we need some kind of global agreement to make sure these technologies are used for good.
Exactly. As technology gets more powerful, we need to think about the ethical, legal, and social consequences and create guidelines to make sure it benefits all of humanity.
Wow, we've covered so much in this part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've gone beyond the hype and looked at how these 12 emerging technologies could actually affect your life.
Right.
And talked about the challenges and opportunities they present.
Exactly.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into these 12 emerging technologies that are going to totally change our world by 2025.
We've explored what these technologies are and how they could impact you.
Right.
Now let's talk about what you can do to get ready for this future.
Okay, because it's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed by all this change.
It is.
So instead of just letting it all happen to us, how can we ride the wave, so to speak?
Exactly. These technologies are creating a ton of opportunities,
Right.
but only for those who are prepared.
Okay, so how do we prepare? In part 2, we talked about constantly learning and adapting.
Right.
But where do we even start?
Start by thinking about what really interests you.
Okay.
Which of these technologies seem the most exciting?
Okay.
Which ones do you think will directly affect your work or your life?
Okay, so narrow down a bit.
Yeah, once you've got a few key areas, then you can dive into the research.
But don't just like passively read articles, right?
No, don't just skim the headlines.
Hi.
Really dig into the material.
Okay.
Look for those deeper insights. Think about the implications and the questions that aren't being answered.
So really engage with it.
Exactly, and don't be afraid to get hands-on.
Okay.
Experiment with AI tools,
Yeah.
Play Play around with AR, VR apps. Go to webinars and workshops. The more you immerse yourself, the more confident you'll become.
So it's about being proactive,
Yes.
taking charge of your learning and shaping your own future.
Exactly.
But what about people who aren't like tech savvy?
Okay.
Can we still thrive in this world where technology is everywhere?
Of course. Technology is just a tool, remember. The most valuable skills in the future won't be technical, they'll be human.
Okay.
Think critical thinking, creativity, communication, problem solving.
Right.
Those are the skills that machines can't replicate.
So we need to focus on what makes us human.
I-
Okay, but how do we turn those human skills into actual jobs? What kind of careers are we talking about?
Well, the job market is changing so fast, but there are definitely some fields that are going to grow like crazy.
Like what?
Think about jobs in AI ethics,
Okay.
data privacy, human-robot interaction, sustainable technology development.
Oh, wow.
And that's just the beginning.
So it's not just about being a programmer or engineer.
Right.
It's about finding where your passions and these new technologies meet.
Exactly. And the coolest jobs probably haven't even been invented yet,
Wow.
This is a time for thinking like an entrepreneur, for coming up with new solutions, for creating your own path.
That's so exciting.
It is.
And a little bit scary.
It can be.
But what about people who are happy in their current jobs?
Okay.
How can we stay relevant as all this new technology comes along?
Well, think about how these technologies could change your industry. Could AI help you be more efficient? Could you use AR, VR to create better experiences for your customers? You don't always have to switch careers to stay ahead of the game.
So just find ways to adapt and evolve within your field.
Exactly. Learning never stops no matter what stage of your career you're in.
Right, but it's not all about just being successful ourselves, is it?
No,
We also have to make sure that these technologies are used for good.
absolutely. We all need to be involved in shaping how these technologies are used ethically.
So what can we do?
Stay informed about the potential impact on society. Have conversations about it in your community support organizations that are promoting responsible innovation.
So it's not just about adapting to the future, it's about creating it together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have to make sure these technologies benefit all of humanity, not just a select few.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive.
It does.
We've explored these 12 emerging technologies and look at how they could affect your life.
Right.
And most importantly, we've talked about how you can be ready for this future.
It's all about being informed, prepared, and engaged.
Exactly. The future isn't something that just happens to us. We create it.
We do.
So stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.
Absolutely.
And together, we can build a future that's both technologically advanced and ethically sound.
I love that.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the future. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep imagining the world you want to create.
See you next time.